Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Kate Almond, and I'm very excited to talk about crypto, stocks, and my long-term outlook for the market with you. Obviously, this should not be taken as financial advice. I don't have any formal financial training, certificates, or degrees, so don't don't consider this financial advice, but consider this speculation. Always consult a financial advisor before making important financial decisions. The last thing I want to say is thank you, Benjamin Cohen, the GOAT of investing. You can find his YouTube channel at Benjamin Cohen. Really one of the greatest minds on YouTube, and I'm hoping to kind of elaborate on some of the points that he's discussed on his channel. So, yeah, thank you, Benjamin Cohen. So, I don't know if you remember last time, if you watched my last episode, which was a short-term outlook on the market, but I discussed a concerning pattern on the S&P 500. So you can see the S&P 500 right here. This is what it has looked like for the past 10 years. It's had a pretty good run, all things considered, but the pattern that I discussed in last video, if you don't remember my short-term outlook, is what's happened recently with the S&P 500. If you look, the current price is around 66,000, but if we go back to, let's say, last November, it was 68. So really, the S&P 500 has kind of done nothing for the past few months, and this is a pretty concerning pattern. It kind of looks like what the market has done is something like this. We can also see on the graph, the last time it had the same behavior where it just does nothing was last year, also in November. And what happened when the S&P 500 hasn't moved in a couple months? Well, it just kind of nosedived. And we can look at other examples of this. So, we can go over here, which is funny because this is exactly almost a year ago. This is 4 years ago, but we see this basic same pattern where, in the exact same months of November through, the first month of the year, S&P 500 doesn't do anything and just plummets down. And we can go back through time. This is COVID right here, so I don't really count that as, I don't consider that normal trading behavior or COVID is a little bit of it's not indicative of normal stock behavior. But we can also see over here where the S&P basically did nothing for many months, like almost half a year. I mean, it just ended up plunging downwards eventually. Going back, we can also kind of see over here the same pattern where the S&P 500 doesn't do anything, it just tumbles. And lastly, right over here as well in 2008. So if we scroll out, we can kind of see all the times that I've shown. And I think it's a compelling argument to be concerned about this kind of price behavior. And what I discussed is that it wouldn't surprise me if we had a short correction. And now, what does that look like? Does that mean we just go down and then go up like this? I'm not sure. Does it mean we kind of go like this? I have no idea. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't look into the future, but I'm fairly confident, we're going to go down. At least that's my thoughts, seeing this pattern. It's always possible this pattern breaks, and, nothing's really guaranteed, but this is pretty convincing, I think, that we're not in store for a good time for the next few months. And if we kind of go back, we look back a little bit into the not too far distant future, we can see here Bitcoin found a low. The S&P 500 found a low at one of these crashes. It wouldn't surprise me too if the S&P 500 went into this price zone right here, or even goes lower than that. But I'm talking about the short-term outlook, and I think there's some information that I kind of didn't elaborate on. Like, why should you really care? If you're someone who's investing for, let's say, the next 40 years, why should you care if you have 40 years to spare? And, it's like, like, some people invested here, but if you're invested in a long time, the S&P 500 is going to go up for a while. So does it really matter if you're investing right here versus right? That's not a good shape. How about that instead? Let's get that. How about this? Does it really matter which spot you invested in? Considering that in like 40 years, the S&P 500 is just going to keep going up like it has been for the last 20 years. Like, look at this 20-year behavior. Does it really matter looking into the short term that much, in my opinion? And, like I said, I'm not a financial advisor, so I can't really give you what you should and shouldn't do. But what I can say is at least my perspective. And, like, in my opinion, what's the point of investing in something that looks like this, that like looks like it's going to go down? What's the point of just losing money for the next few months when you can be in another asset and then come back to the S&P 500 if it does crash and you've covered all your bases? You're able to enjoy. It's just going to feel a lot better investing down here and just going up instead of riding this down for several months and then you're break even half a year later. Like, what's the point where you haven't even made money during this process? And specifically, I think this is the real problem, is there's a larger opportunity in the future. And the opportunity that I'm talking about is Bitcoin and what is in store for Bitcoin. So I just want to quickly talk about Bitcoin for a second. And I was looking at Bitcoin here a moment ago. But yeah, this is almondinvest.com if you guys want to check it out. One of the coolest websites in the world. But I wanted to show some patterns that I've seen in Bitcoin and why, I'm at least worried about losing money. So this is the price of Bitcoin. One thing I'm going to show, what I'm going to highlight, is the year of the election. So in 2024, the election was right here, close to around right there. I mean, realistically, it was, actually right there. The election for 2020 was over there, and the election for 2016 was over here. And if we go back 1 year, almost a year after the election, this is around a year after the election. Right here is a year after the election. Well, you start to notice an interesting pattern. So I'll put circles around 1 year after the election. And what do you notice? They all, 1 year after the election, tends to correspond to where Bitcoin usually hits these super high prices. And something that's really interesting is we zoom in on here. Let's zoom in. I'm going to left click and it's going to show me how many days Bitcoin's been going down for. And if we go to its lowest price, wow, wouldn't you look at that? It took 360 days for Bitcoin to hit its highest price 1 year after, almost 1 year after the election, I should say. And for a full year, it just went down at 83%, probably even more than that. And, that's pretty crazy. I mean, if you look at this over here, that says December on my mouse. And where did it bottom? Also the month of December. That's pretty crazy. Well, what about the 2020 election? What about that? Well, if I zoom in here, Bitcoin hit a high price of 63,000 in November. And let's see where it hit its lowest price. Wow, wouldn't you look at that? Also, 1 year later, it hit its low also in November. You see that? It hit this super high price early November, dropped until next November. Just continually dropped. And that's pretty shocking to me. I mean, even if we look at this, so let's look at it from this. Let's go to the bottom. So, like I said, Bitcoin hit its high price here and dropped for a full year. But let's look at this. From this point it dropped to the next point, we can see 1,600 days. Sorry, 1,060 days, I meant to say, excuse me. Well, if we look, so top there in the bottom tier, well, why don't we look at the amount of days that happened between this right here? How many days did this happen? Did it take to Bitcoin to grow? It went up for 1,060 days. We're right on the dot. It's pretty crazy to me that Bitcoin's done that. It's just shocking. And another pattern that I've noticed is, we look at where Bitcoin hit. It hit a high price, what it looks like is the current high price, of $122,000 in October. So right here is October. It hit 67,000 in November. And it hit 16,000 in December for this kind of election cycle. So remember, this is December. This is November. And this is October. December, November, October. I mean, it's just weird how this works out. And I know some people, they like to kind of overcomplicate things with investing, but you look at this and it's like, okay, if Bitcoin has had this pattern where, it goes up for around 1,060 days straight, it basically just goes up. What are the chances that it just happened to do it again? And, you're looking at this pattern play out and you're like, do you just ignore it? At the point I'm trying to get to is, if this topped in November and went down for a full year until next November, I would expect Bitcoin to keep going down until this current October, which is only half a year away, basically, for Bitcoin to keep going down. And you have this amazing opportunity to buy Bitcoin, likely, if this pattern plays out, likely at one of these super low prices. And dude, imagine buying Bitcoin at $3,000 and 10 years later it's above 100,000. It's crazy stuff. And this is what I think is going to play out. And if let's look at some other pretty cool data that I have on my website. We have what I call the bull band and the bear band. These ones right here. So I'll click on both of those and we'll show them up here. And you can see these bands in blue and red. And there's not too, in my opinion, some of the patterns here are not super obvious at first glance. But what I tend to notice is if we zoom back into these cycles, during midterm years, Bitcoin, you will usually just try to sit under these bands. If you notice, look, it just sits under the band and just won't rise above it. Here, it doesn't do that in 2018, the midterm year. If we go back to the next midterm year, which is in 2022, we start 2022 here, we can see Bitcoin just stays below it almost the entire time. And if we look at the current midterm year, which is 2026, we literally haven't even gotten above it, these bands. And on top of that, let's look at another pattern. I said that Bitcoin usually bottoms it goes down for an entire year. It's just going down. But one thing that's kind of interesting to note is if you look, Bitcoin barely touches this band and it crashes down. Touches the band right there, crashes down. Touches the band, slightly goes above it, crashes down. I mean, you can see it probably touched it here, just crashes down. It cannot stay above this. But the thing I want to notice is this part right there. I mean, we're a few months away from December. It touches the band and then it crashes down, right? You see this? Well, if we go into the next midterm year, so 2022, you can't even make this up. You can't even make it up. It hits the band, and what happens? It crashes. So, what if we're in October and Bitcoin goes back up to the band and crashes? In my opinion, that's the opportunity I'm looking for. Not financial advice. That's what I'm waiting for. So when I'm talking about the short term for the S&P 500, every dollar you lose here is a dollar you're going to be missing when you could have invested in Bitcoin right there or right there. You know? I mean, you're going to be missing out on that. So it's like, what's the point? This is the point I should try to articulate, which I wanted to. But when you have an opportunity like this, every single dollar you lose here is a dollar you can't put into this. Every single one. So why would you die or risk the potential of just collapsing your money when you have an amazing opportunity given to you on the horizon? Like, why waste your money when you have this, when you can just play it safe? You can avoid this battle. You don't need to fight this battle, this losing battle. And in a few months, you win the war. You have this to look forward to. You have 160 days of pure upwards motion. So why even risk it? Is, I guess, the point I want to get across. Like, is it even really worth, like, losing your money, and then you have less to invest when this rolls around? I don't think it's worth it. And so I guess that's the point of why I discussed about gold, energy, and I think SDRC, which is a basic stock which gives you 11% dividends. You know, because if this pattern plays out, it's not guaranteed to play out, I should say. You know, you might be down 10% and you might just be waiting months until you're just break even. Where if you went into something like gold, it might recover faster. Or if you went into SDRC, it's just going to go, I don't want to say it's going to go that high, but you're getting at least a 6% guaranteed. You're going to have more money when this rolls around, guaranteed. You know what I mean? So it's tough. I don't know. But there's always a possibility that, you know, it goes down fast and just recovers like that. And in that situation, you know, you have more money actually when this rolls around. So it's hard to say, but for me, I think it's like, just you have more. You always have more to lose than you have to gain, I should say. So I don't think it's wise to try to die or lose money, I should say, and destroy your money when there's a good investing opportunity only half a year away. And there's so many patterns that kind of indicate that Bitcoin's likely going to keep doing what it usually does. It's going to do what it's done for the past almost 10 years. And yeah, that's what I expect to happen for Bitcoin. I expect it to go down until this October, or then until 2023, it goes up. And as I discussed, this is in October. This one's in November. This one's in December. So I expect this next top that you would want to sell it around September of 2030. September 2030, somewhere around there. Is what I'm thinking if this pattern plays out. Now, another interesting thing is I have a few kind of indicators that I like on here. But one of them that I just want to briefly discuss is there's two that are pretty helpful for selling. So this is a thing called a stochastic RSI, and it looks at things like statistics, standard deviations, just basically statistics of the Bitcoin price. And one thing I've noticed is it's done a fairly decent job at telling you when to sell Bitcoin. A fairly decent job. Is it perfect? Well, obviously it's not perfect, because if you sold here, you would have missed this entire write-up. If you sold here, you would have missed the entire write-up. If you sold here, I mean, you would have missed out so much. So, I mean, it's not a perfect signal, but what if we're in 2033, it's September, and you see this fire again? That Bitcoin's statistically higher than it should be normally. I don't know. It's crazy. Sometimes we just live in a simulation. And I think the last thing I want to say is, if you look at this over here, I want you to look at this. We can see Bitcoin has this green section here, has another green section there, and has another green section. So that's 3. If we look over here, we see one big green section, another green section, and another green section with the RSI. I mean, if we look 1, and we're part of the way through 2, this to me just looks like we're just right here. Sorry, I think it's my website's, I think I just broke it. That's a shame. But if you look, we were midway through this green section in May, and currently it's May. I mean, it's playing out statistically how it did right over here. And if we look, also in May, we were also in that green zone. I don't know. It's just crazy stuff. I think it's crazy stuff. So that's the point I'm trying to, you can see that it just looks like history's repeating itself. We're probably going to see in October, these patterns that I'm discussing here are probably going to be playing out, and that's going to be it. So while we're waiting, this is 6 months in the future, there's no need to die until then. You have plenty of time, and this, in my opinion, is a very reliable investment. Now, this isn't to say you should go all in. This isn't to say you should take out a loan and risk your financial future and just bet it all on Bitcoin. That's too risky. And the last observation too I'll make is, if you look up here, Bitcoin went up 18x. If we look over here, Bitcoin went up 7x. If we look over here, Bitcoin went up 23x. The obvious thing is, as Bitcoin goes on, it's making less and less money every single year. So, even though it's going to be an obvious, what I think it might be, it's obviously going to play out probably like it usually has. I think that's the most likely outcome. Looking at data, people just kind of like to go off intuition, but just looking at data statistics, we can see Bitcoin is just playing out what it usually does. But looking at this data, it's like, I think it's just going to play out how it's usually played out in the, and throughout this entire history. And, even though you're going to be buying on a good opportunity, I would not expect Bitcoin to really, go up 15x during this 1,000 days. It's probably not going to do a 15x, but, we go back to the S&P 500. Where was it in 2020? In 2020, it was at $4,000. And right now it's at, around $7,000. So it's almost doubled. It's almost doubled since 2020, right? That's pretty good. I mean, Bitcoin's 3x'd. So, whereas the S&P 500 barely doubled, this has done 6 times that. So for every 1% you could have made in the S&P 500, you would have made 6% here. So, and that's just looking at this. Imagine if you sold at the top. I'm trying to give out this information to help people make better financial decisions. If you start at the top, you did a 6x, whereas the S&P 500 it's barely doubled. So you just did 3 times what the S&P 500 did. Yeah, so that's kind of my logic. That's why I was talking about, you should be careful of losing money, because we're coming up on this, and I think this is an important time that can really change probably your life. It'd be a good investment, and so that's my view on Bitcoin for the long term. So, for the next 6 months, we're probably just going down, and you probably shouldn't short Bitcoin, even though I'm talking about this, because you never know what's going to happen. But I would say to expect that. And now, the last thing I want to briefly discuss on, I know this video is running 25 minutes. I'm just kind of sitting here rambling on. But the last thing I want to talk about is how to better invest in Bitcoin. So, let's say, hypothetically, let's say this pattern plays out well. How could we take advantage of it if it hypothetically plays out? Like, how can we do a better job? Well, one stock I want to talk about very quickly is MicroStrategy. So you can see MicroStrategy in this, red line, and you can see Bitcoin in the blue line. Sorry, in the green line. Excuse me. The green line is Bitcoin. The red line is MicroStrategy. If we go back just to Bitcoin, in the past, from this stretch of span, Bitcoin went up 600%. So it did a 6x. That's pretty decent. Let's see what MicroStrategy did. So it was MicroStrategy got $14, and it went to $400. It did it did a 27x. While Bitcoin did a 6x, while the S&P 500 did 60%. So this right here, in terms of the S&P 500, if you were to measure like that, I mean, it did, let's see if I can get my mouse right on the top here. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. I need to zoom in. Let me zoom in. This is to see how funny this is. So actually, yeah, I did a 27. Oh, actually, my mouse isn't right at the top. Okay. That looks a little funky, but it did 28x. The S&P 500 did 60%. So we look at that. It basically outperformed. So for every 1% you would have gotten in the S&P 500, you would have made like 50% here in MicroStrategy. Whereas, Bitcoin went up 6x, MicroStrategy went up almost 30x. That is ridiculous. Look at that. Oh, it's crazy to look at. That's just insane. So, what is MicroStrategy? I know you're asking. I'm just picking up a random stock. I'm sitting here laughing at myself. But MicroStrategy is basically a company where they have the stock for their company, and they charge a fee, basically. And this isn't actually how it works, but it sort of works in a way. I think it's fair to imagine it like this. MicroStrategy is a company that is able to sell stocks. Every time it sells a stock, it charges a little bit of a fee. Let's say a stock is $90, right? It's a $90 stock. It has a $10 fee. That fee that you pay, MicroStrategy uses to buy Bitcoin with. So every single time someone buys this stock, the company then goes and buys more Bitcoin. So over time, it's accumulating more and more and more Bitcoin. Every single time someone buys a stock, and then every single time the price of Bitcoin goes up, well, the company's worth more money. It owns a certain amount of Bitcoin, so it's actually worth more. It has Bitcoin, so the stock is worth more. So then the stock goes up because it has more Bitcoin, it's worth more, and because the stock goes up, more people buy because they want to invest in it because people want to make money. And when they buy, the company gets even more Bitcoin to buy because it has that little tax, which it uses that revenue from its taxes to invest again back into Bitcoin, meaning it has more Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin goes up, the stock goes up even more. So that's kind of the idea of this stock, MicroStrategy. And if we look at Bitcoin and MicroStrategy, I mean, if we look, you can almost see they look so similar. And it's pretty obvious why they look so similar. It's because this company relies on Bitcoin. They buy Bitcoin. And so if we knew where the price of Bitcoin bottoms at, like if you look over here, they both kind of hit a low price together. So it seems obvious to me that if you want to buy a version of Bitcoin that's, makes more money and kind of follows Bitcoin, well, I think MicroStrategy is the stock that you're looking for. But there's one thing I want to point out quickly, and then we can get going. But if you look very carefully. Okay, I'm going to draw a box. You can see MicroStrategy hit its all-time price here. Wow. Bitcoin hit its all-time high over here. Oh, doesn't want to let me draw, I think. What the heck? Right here. There we go. So you can see February, November. We can see November, and it hit its all-time high. Bitcoin did in October. What I'm trying to get at is that MicroStrategy actually doesn't. You would expect it to follow Bitcoin very closely, but actually, MicroStrategy, the company that's, Bitcoin is this red one. MicroStrategy is the green one. If you look, this is Bitcoin. This is MicroStrategy. Just look at where the circles are, okay? Look at where the circles are. MicroStrategy doesn't always follow Bitcoin. It actually, in my opinion, MicroStrategy, it gets, basically what happens is it grows too fast. It grows too fast, too unreasonably high, and people just sell out of it. So the point I'm trying to make is you don't want to just sit in MicroStrategy for the next 3 years, actually. If you want to buy MicroStrategy, that's great. But obviously be aware, if you're going to buy MicroStrategy, I would only be in it for, for 700 days. Okay? That's my thoughts. Only be in it for, 2 years and then get out. Yeah, that's my thoughts. So that's all I have to discuss. Like Bitcoin, if you buy it at the bottom, you want to be in Bitcoin for 1,600 days. If you buy MicroStrategy, even though it has the possibility of running higher than Bitcoin, it doesn't go up the same amount of time. It goes only up, I would say, probably 700 days. And I think this is likely to repeat. And if we look here too, one thing I noticed is they've been doing this strategy since 2020. So if we look over here, it took, 700 days, a little bit less than that, 680 to bottom. If we look at how many days over here, we're almost right on the 500th day, if we kind of round up a little bit. So that means we have slightly more than 180 days until we get to that 600-day mark, where usually MicroStrategy bottoms at. If you weren't paying attention, 180 days it's slightly more than 180 days. This is in a bottom. 180 days is also in October. This means this is likely going to hit a low price in October. What hit a low price? What is supposed to hit a low price in October? Also, Bitcoin. It's kind of crazy how that works out. But yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts. So today we discussed why you should probably be a little bit careful about investing right now in S&P 500 and what I think can be a good opportunity coming up, which is Bitcoin. Kind of with these patterns that it's been showing. And if Bitcoin plays out the same way it has, it's likely MicroStrategy is also going to do very, very well. So that's kind of what my expectations are. That's the thing I'm looking for. And that's why I'm going to have a low risk tolerance until this October, where Bitcoin and MicroStrategy are both looking to bottom out. And yeah, that's my thoughts for today. The last thing I'll actually say is, MicroStrategy almost did a 30x, basically, in this short amount of time. I would not expect MicroStrategy to do another 30x in the next 3 years. It's probably not going to do as great as a job as that. It might do a 12, 13x, which I think is fantastic and still great. But I don't know if I would expect this exact same, mind-blowing returns. But, 13x, it's like, really? Most people in 13x in 2 years, most people get 50%. And you're going to do 26 times better than that. Likely in the next, 2.5 years. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts. That's where I'm going to leave it today. And actually, I'm not done with this topic, so I'm going to release another video soon talking a little bit more about crypto. Because surprisingly, we just touched the surface on Bitcoin, but on my website, there's some other interesting cryptos that I want to talk about, some cool patterns. But that's all I had to discuss for today. 37 minutes. A lot of talking. My voice is getting a little bit sore, but hopefully I'll see your awesome face sometime soon. Take care and survive the markets.